Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of the Visto vlog, where we work with Andreas to prep his work permit and bring him to Canada. Andreas, how you doing?
Good morning, Josh. I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you. How's the snow in Toronto, Josh, right now?
How's the what here?
How's the weather? How's the snow?
You know what? It's actually been okay.
Excellent.
We had snow a couple days ago, but it's warmed up and it looks like it's sunny out right now. I have the blinds closed, but it's sunny out. It's been a little bit warmer, hovering around 0 degrees. So it
Excellent.
seems like spring is here or around the corner, and it'll be just in time for to welcome you. Right? We have a big update
Yes.
to talk about, and well, a few things to talk about, but we're getting close, right?
Yes, we are very close. We are very close. We have made all the documents needed for the work permit. So today we will review it, no? In each one and what is for each one it for, no?
Yeah, so in the last episode we talked a little bit about some of the basic document requirements. What we wanted to do today is now we've gathered all of them. So we're not going to do a deep dive into every single document, but what we'll do today is review every document that you collected or prepared or filled out. We'll quickly talk about each one and why we gathered it, and maybe you'll talk about some of the difficulties that came with some of them. And then that'll be it for today. And then the next episode, I think maybe we'll talk about planning your trip, right? Because you actually have it booked, right?
Yes, right now we have a book. We have the tickets too, and hotels book, and a lot of the stuff. It's coming.
Yeah, so Andreas has his flight tickets booked, so we got to get him ready. I mean, we're pretty much ready. A couple last items outstanding. But I quickly want to make a note because in most cases, if you're applying for a work permit not at the port of entry, I recommend not booking a flight until you have the approval, right? Because you don't know how long the processing might be if you apply online or if you apply by paper. So Andreas was able to book his flights because he will be applying at the port of entry, aka on his flight into Canada. So just a caveat there for those who might be applying online. So anyways, so let's jump in, Andreas. I'm going to share my screen in a second, and we'll go over the quick documents. Do you have any thoughts, first of all, on just in general, prepping all of the documents? Was it harder than you thought? Was it easier than you thought? Was it quicker than you thought? What do you have to say about that?
Well, uh, from my experience, Josh, what we will show up today, right now, is not written in some place, because just the documentation of how fill the forms is already there, but it's not specific. It's not an plan that you have to follow step by step.
Mm-hmm.
You need to join every knowledge, okay? You need to know every knowledge to get, okay, this person needs A, B, C, D forms to get an work permit. Another person, this another things, because he has or she is applying for another kind of work permit. Okay, I think that was the difficult. Well, not the difficult. The knowledge from my part, because for example, I will arrive to the port of entry. I will get an work permit. That's it, and I know. Yes, my wife or my spouse, yes, needs an open work permit too. But the situation about my kids in details, that isn't true for me, because, for example, my kid is 8 years old, and uh, she needs a study permit, and the youngest is 5 years old. He needs a temporary uh,
The visitor
temporary
visa, yeah.
exactly. And then for that two children, which forms will need it? That's you need to go in deep in the documentation to get that kind of stuff. That is was the hard part. Obviously, I have a lawyer in front of me, so I can ask the lawyer. But I was thinking in a person who didn't have a lawyer or who didn't have a consultant. How how will be the forms, and is the forms is completed or needed another one? That it was the hard part. Yes, definitely I get a help of the great lawyer, so it's not a lawyer, so it's not a problem.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems is if you're doing this on your own and if you're relying on the IRCC website, which you should, the problem is that the information is so scattered, right? So if you can find a work permit, like IRCC has work permit guide for a work permit from outside Canada. But the problem is that guide is a general guide for all work permits, right? So it doesn't necessarily have all the details on what to do for children. It doesn't necessarily have the details required for an ICT work permit or for a GTS work permit or for, other types of work permits where you have to go to different parts of the IRCC website. So you kind of have to tie together like the requirements from the specific program to the specific type of application. And then you also need to consider just the general work permit document checklist, right? So they're kind of spread all over the place. It's not done so efficiently. But anyways, that's why we're here, right? That's why Visto exists, and that's why it's a good idea to do your diligence and then also work with professionals to help make it a little bit easier. So let's share the screen here. I'm just switching to share screen. So we can see here, this is a list of all the documents that Andreas prepped and sent to me to review, and we'll go over them quickly just by title. I'm obviously not going to open them up. Andreas, I don't think you can see my screen. The first document here is a bank statement, and primarily I think what we were looking for there is maybe what we'll do is we'll talk by category, right, Andreas? Because if we're going to talk about a bank statement, it's probably worth it to talk about the other work experience stuff. So the one thing that we want to prove is that, and this applies to almost every work permit, is that Andreas has the necessary skills and experience to come work for Visto under the role that we're saying that he has, right, as a software engineer. So in this case, what we included, Andreas, right, is, so number one, bank statement. I'm just scrolling down here. Work experience relationship. We have there. Education we'll talk about separately. Pay stubs, resume, and then we have some Visto documents we'll talk about, and then the work experience letters. So just to kind of summarize, to prove work experience, it's a good thing to include reference letters, pay slips. In this case, you included bank statements as well, so showing the money going into your account. It isn't always required.
Yes, and it mentioned the relationship we have when I working remotely. Yeah, there's the transaction receiving money from a company. That's the reason, because I put the bank movement, because that showed my relationship first working with Visto like remotely first, and then they needed to be contracted on site. So that's another evidence, okay, of I working for a Canadian company remotely.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, so you've been working remotely for Visto. We want to prove that. We've done that through what? We've done that through, number one, a copy of our remote agreement, right, while you've been working with us since, I think, September. A confirmation letter, right, written by myself saying, yes, Andreas has been working for us remotely. Here's why we need him in Canada. Here's how the relationship is going to work in Canada. Here's details of the role. A copy of that Canadian employment job offer or employment agreement. And proof of payment, as you said, right? So pay slips, bank movement,
exactly.
et cetera, et cetera. I think that's everything, right? That we included from Visto.
Yes. That is the documents required for the work permit. Yes, for the work permit. Hmm?
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. And then you got the work permit, the work reference letters, and pay stubs from previous employers. That's really important too, because again, we're trying to prove that Andreas has been doing this for years and years and years. So here's some letters from the companies he's worked at previously and pay slips from companies he's worked at previously to, again, show that he's been doing this for much longer than just the last few months. And then, okay, so in terms of education as well, right? Hey, Andreas has a degree, right? He has a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. Do you maybe want to talk about those, Andreas? Was it hard to get them because in your case, you were actually in the middle of still getting the master's degree, and then also maybe talk a little bit about having to have them translated, right? Because if your documents are not in English or French, they have to be professionally translated. So maybe talk about what that experience was like.
Yeah. Well, in this week, in a good timing, I received a notice. Andreas, your master degree documentation is ready to be printed. So, well, I hurry up the things and I sent and I scanned a copy of my documents to the certificated translator, and he translated the documentation without the papers in physics. Huh? When he finished, I have to go to her office, to his office, the translator, and when the paper show it to him, and he can guarantee the translation correctly and certificate it and stamp the certification. Then I go back and sent, okay, I updated the form of the work permit, because in the past we put the bachelor, and now we have a master degree. I replaced the documentation, and that's it. It was very easy. It's not a lot of trouble.
Yeah, just make sure you're working with a properly certified, an actual certified translator, and that stuff's pretty straightforward. And then, as you said, on the immigration forms, in your case, IMM 1295, it asks for your most recent or your highest level of education. So in your case, we updated it from the bachelor's degree to the master's degree. I think it's a good sign that it came this week, or last week is almost like a sign from the immigration gods, right? We're ready to go. So, okay, great. Let's move down the list. So, birth certificates. So in this case, Andreas has 2 children. And so I think these were, I don't want to open them on screen, but these were certified translations as well, Andreas?
Yes, it's translated too. Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Yes, it's that. And it's only not to forget, for example, in my case, okay, every person in the family needs forms, okay? In my case, I need the work permit form. I need a family form too, to fill up with information of my family. When I jump to my wife, my wife needs the work permit for open, the form for open work permit, and the family forms, and the both children needs one form for student permit and the family form, and the same for the youngest. No,
they don't need the family form. The kids don't need 5707.
Oh.
Yeah, you didn't include them here. I'm pulling them up on screen. You have it correct. So for Andreas,
yes, it's not
we have 1295, right, which is the work permit form, as you said. We have 5707, which is the family information form. In your case, we have 5476, which is the use of representative form. So if you're using an immigration lawyer or a consultant, then you want to include that form, as they'll be quote unquote applying on your behalf or able to talk on your behalf for the form. And then in your case, again, when you're applying in person or by paper, you have to include the document checklist. So in this case, 5488. I can pull this one up because there's no confidential information. But yeah, this is the document checklist for the work permit submitted from outside Canada. So you do have to include this if you're either applying by paper or in person. So we got that right. I'm just clicking into Monica. So as well, we need, even though it's a open work permit, she is still needing the same form, right? 1295 is still a work permit from outside Canada form. She has a 5476, which is the use of rep form, and the 5707, which is the family information form.
And the only thing is only change the type of, it's only a select box different.
Yeah.
To be honest, it's the same information, okay?
Well, it's the same information
from the side of the Monica, and the same information from my side. Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead.
The only difference being, so yes, you're going to choose open work permit as opposed to a closed work permit or an LMIA backed work permit, and you obviously won't have information for an employer. So you can leave the Canadian employer details blank on the open work permit. And the key here, and I'm just clicking into the children's forms, is you only need a use of rep form and or a family information form for applicants that are 18 or older. So in this case, we see Andreas has a visitor visa form for his youngest, who is 5, and a study permit form for his oldest, who is 8. And because they're not 18 or older, they do not need a use of rep form or a family information form. So that's why they're left out here. Okay, so we covered forms. Let's talk about, very similarly to the birth certificate, proof of marriage, right? Which in your case, so Andreas is including his spouse, so he needs a document to prove marriage. In this case, it's a marriage certificate, right, Andreas? Was that pretty straightforward?
Yes, it's a marriage certificate from the government because we married legally, and the translation of it, of course. No?
Right. So very similarly to the birth certificates, you need a copy of the marriage certificate if you're bringing a spouse, and of course, if it's not in English or French, professionally translated. The next folder we have here is passports. So this is required for all applicants, right? Parents, spouse, and children. Pretty straightforward, right, Andreas? You're just you're taking a good scanned copy of the biographical page of the passport.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Biographical and meaning the page with your picture.
Yes, and for the 4 members of my family. Yeah.
Correct. Awesome. Let's talk quickly about resume. So again, this is proving that Andreas has the work experience, the education, etc., to come and perform the tasks that we need him to in Canada. The only thing from my end, Andreas, I remember is we wanted to have it completely updated, right? So the first version you sent to me, you didn't mention Visto, and so we added in Visto as the current employer because we want all of the information to be true, of course, number one, and to align, right? So if we're providing reference letters saying, hey, Andreas has been working for Visto remotely for the last few months, we want that to be reflected on the resume, right?
Excellent. Yes, definitely. That was a mistake for my own.
Well,
but this is solved. Yeah, you said it.
And that's why it's good to have someone to review, right? Because you're thinking about 100 things, right? Work experience documents, translations, filling out forms for everybody, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's easy to miss some of those details that an outsider or ideally an immigration professional would pick up. So anyways, that was an easy fix.
Yeah.
We have
another thing I want to add, Josh, is
Yep.
You can see in the title of the documentation, version 5. I have changed my resume 5 times when I was trying to find a job in Canada. So yes, I have version 1, then converted to version 2, and then was finished, kind of said, and enhanced the version of the resume, because that resume was shared with you and Josh and Alex to get, okay, what is the knowledge and the experience of Andres. So you received the version 4 and added the last part, no? It's converted to the version 5. And that will be the last one right now. The last update.
Awesome. That is good to see. And then we have vaccine proof. So in this case, this is more related to, because Andreas is applying at the port of entry, he'll need vaccine proof to actually enter the country. So that's a bit of a different topic, right? Maybe what we'll do, Andreas, is we'll talk about this in the next episode, which is prepping to actually travel to Canada, right? For most work permit applicants, if you're not coming through a treaty, a CUSMA application, and if you're not applying at the port of entry, first you're submitting your work permit, then hopefully it gets approved, then you travel to Canada. So it's two different steps. You're doing both in one, right? And so that means we need proof of your vaccine in order to make sure not only do you have everything for your work permit, but you have everything so you're allowed to actually enter Canada. So maybe we'll go into detail on that in the next episode. But other than, yep.
Josh, I have another questions. Well, we have now all the documentation required. When I don't know if you remember, we have here two ways to go. One is apply directly in the port of entry. Another one is applying online, get a result, and then goes on the port of entry. Can you explain a little in the second way? Because I know a lot of people there is applying in the second path too.
Yeah, so it's really more of it comes down to two factors, right? Number one, eligibility, and number two, what's your preference? So we've talked about this a little bit in recent episodes, and I recommend, if you haven't seen the first few episodes and you want to learn more about the eligibility criteria for different applications, to watch those old episodes. But this is a good question, right? So who and when can you apply at the port of entry? And is it a good idea to, right? So as we mentioned in previous episodes, only certain people can even apply at the port of entry, meaning when you're flying into Canada. If you're not eligible through a treaty like CUSMA or an intra-company transfer, in some cases, some intra-company transferees, then you're most likely going to apply online or by paper, which means you prepare all your documents, you submit them to IRCC while you're remaining in your home country, you wait for a decision. Once it's approved, then you apply, then you travel to Canada. In this case, you're actually gathering all your documents, you're traveling to Canada because you're eligible through CUSMA, Andreas is eligible through CUSMA, and applying at the port of entry. The reason why I think it's a good idea to do it when you're eligible is you're going to save a lot of time, right? It really comes down to, number one, time, and number two, are you willing to take the quote-unquote risk, right? So first, let's talk about timing. If you submit an application right now to IRCC, it's probably going to take about 2 to 3 months. This can vary, right? For example, we focus on skilled worker GTS type permits, which are quote-unquote expedited. But the problem is now, because of the COVID backlogs and them giving priority to people in Ukraine or related to what's happening in Ukraine or Afghanistan, average processing times are a little bit slower. And depending on the type of work permit you're applying for, you could wait months and months and months for it to be approved, right? In your case, you can hop on a plane tomorrow and hopefully be approved, right? So it's a time, number one is a time thing, right? Do you want to wait? Are you not in a rush? Are you trying to finish a contract in your home country? Are you waiting for your kids to finish the school year? You know what I mean? If that's the case, maybe you just want to quote unquote play it safe and apply online and wait for it to be approved. On the other hand, if you don't want to wait, let's go, hop on the plane and let's go. Just make sure you're prepared.
And take the race, obviously.
Well, so the second part is, do you want to quote unquote take the chance? And the reason why I say that is because nobody should ever guarantee that 100% your application will be approved, right? So when you're applying at the port of entry, just like when you're applying online, there's a chance that your application gets rejected. And based on the reasons why, and based on whether you have a travel document or not, that could mean that they turn you around and you have to fly home, right? So there's that risk, right? If you're staying in Mexico and you apply online and you get rejected, it's fine. You're in Mexico, you're at home, or whatever country you live in. If you get rejected at the port of entry, you might have to get right on a plane and go back, right?
Exactly.
So that's the risk. It tends to go well if you're actually eligible and you prepare a very, very good application, right? Because for applications like this, there's no reason that it should be rejected if you provide everything properly and you're eligible, right?
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
Well, thank you, Josh. And I want to ask you another thing. Well, we hear that we have now the documentation right now, but the company like you, Visto, the company who contract a foreigner needs to do something too, no? What is the things or the to-do list you have to do for get a work permit ready?
Yeah, and I'm gonna write this down on my to-do list because I do have to do it. Employer portal. Okay, so if you're sponsoring a skilled worker, in most cases, you're doing it through, you need to do as an employer one of two things, as well as helping provide the documentation, right? So the first thing you should do as a good employer, as we've already done, is help prep all the documents needed to prove that there's been work in the past and there's going to be work in the future, right? So in our case, it was providing the previous contract, the remote worker contract, providing the future Canadian employment agreement, and ideally writing a letter as well, right? So I wrote a confirmation letter saying, hey, Andreas has been working with us remotely. We need him here in Canada. Here's what he's going to be doing. Here's why we need him here, etc., etc. Secondly, you're going to need either an LMIA or to record the employment offer in the employer portal, right? So the LMIA would be something like a GTS work permit, a high wage work permit, or just a traditional kind of LMIA application, if you need an LMIA. In this case, we don't need an LMIA because we're going through CUSMA. What I do have to do, and what any other company does have to do in this case, is basically go online through what's called the employer portal on the Canadian government website and register the job offer with the government. And what this does is, and this can be done in, 30 minutes. So I'll get it done this week or next. We still have a few weeks, right, until you travel. But I'll probably do it early next week. You go online, you create an account as a company, you register the job offer that you're giving, so it will ask you questions about the role, the salary, etc., etc. You put it in, and that generates a document and an employer portal number that I then have to pass to you, Andreas, so you can include that number on your work permit form, right? As you've left out for now on 1295 on the Canadian employment page. You actually have to add in either an LMIA number if we do an LMIA, or the employment portal number, which I'll have for you by early next week. So that's the last thing that I have to do on my end in terms of getting you the right information and documents, and then we'll have you print everything out, and we'll have we'll probably just do a quick review together, make sure, okay, check, everything's there, and that's the last item.
And print the documentation, correct?
Yeah, you're going to need to print everything, and you're going to want to make sure that it's printed very well, right? So we don't want blurry documents, we don't want blurry passports, we want all the text to be easy to read, because if an agent can't read it, they're not going to accept it as support, right? And especially at the port of entry, you can't go home and get other documents, right? So if you apply online and they don't like one of your documents, they might say, hey, please send us another version. Port of entry, there's no other version, right? You're standing there with everything you've got. So we want to make sure you use a good printer. If you don't have a great printer, I recommend going to like a printing shop, right? Or a Staples, or depending on where you live, some like office supply store with a really good printer to make sure that the quality is very high. But we're at the final steps, man. We're getting close.
Yes, I know.
So this is
We're
really
excited.
good. Hopefully, this has helped a lot of put into perspective for potential employees what goes into it, and for employers what could go into it, especially for a CUSMA application. Any last thoughts, Andreas, or what would be your number one tip for someone who's abroad considering coming to Canada or might be about to start prepping their application? What's one piece of advice you would give them?
Yes, I think the uncertain knowledge is your biggest problem. No? So you have to read everything very well to feel the correct information. If it is possible, contract someone else to advise you. Someone else to advise you. I think it will be yes, because the information is there, but when you read it, like you said at the beginning, okay, is something is the general information, but you get the feeling of the knowledge things. I need more information. I need another one. Is not needed. This one is this needed or not? That knowledge that is your biggest trouble, no? And your biggest fear.
And I would say too, Andres, you're in the upper echelon, right? In terms of foreign workers who want to come to Canada. You're up there in terms of you've done a lot of research, right? You know a lot of the programs and stuff like that. And even for you, there were some questions, right? Not a ton of questions,
Right.
but there's just so many forms and questions and answers to provide.
Details.
So many little details that inevitably there are some struggles. So as Andreas said, and it doesn't have to be through Visto or it doesn't have to be through us, but if you are going through the process, do what you can, or ask your employer to help, or see if your employer might help cover the expenses of a lawyer or a consultant, even just to do a review of your documents, right? Not even to submit everything on your behalf, although if you can, that's ideal. But even just to have a professional do a proper review to capture anything that might be missing, because it's not something you want to get wrong, right? One little detail goes wrong, that creates a delay or that creates a rejection, and all of a sudden you're set back for quite some time.
Everything have a risk, yes.
Yeah.
That you said.
Anyways, this has been great. What we're going to do is we'll bring this episode to an end. In the next episode, Andreas, I think what we should talk about is actually prepping to travel. So what goes into, eligibility now, and we'll touch a little bit on the topic of how to actually enter Canada, because the entry requirements may change over time, right, related to vaccine and stuff like that. But we'll talk about actually booking flights, what's required from the travel side, what you've set up in Canada. Are you staying in Airbnb, or what those first few days are going to look like. And then the next episode maybe we'll do from the airport, who knows, but
who knows. We'll be awesome recording arriving. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Andreas, thank you as always for tuning in. Thanks everybody for watching. Please make sure to like the video if you do, and subscribe if you want to tune in to future episodes. Andreas, any last words?
Bye-bye. Thank you for all, Josh.
My pleasure, and we'll see everybody in the next episode.